What's going on, guys, and welcome to the channel. For the first video here, we are gonna talk about the cheapest way to get into fishing. I am gonna show you the stuff that I have used that has worked for me and how you can get all of that for cheap. Let's get started. First, if you're going fishing, you need a rod and reel. For your first rod and reel, if you're starting out, I recommend you buy a combo. And then I am gonna suggest a spinning combo because spinning reels are really easy to learn. This is my favorite one, the Ugly Stick GX2. This is the rod that I use the most today, and you can use this for anything. You can use this for bass, for crappie, catfish. I mean, maybe not catfish, but I use this for bass, carp, trout, panfish, and it works. And you see like pros that have like 10 different rods and ones for like this is a jerkbait rod, this is a topwater rod, this is a frog rod, this is a I don't know, a crankbait rod. And like dude, like sure, maybe it's a bit more optimal for that, but with an Ugly Stick GX2, you can throw basically all of those lures with a couple exceptions and with and it'll work. I recommend you get the 6'6" medium. Yeah, this looks good. Yeah, hi. It's me, Post Editing Warrior 24. And I realized that if you're a beginner, you have no idea what the heck I just said. So let me explain it for you real quick. The 6'6" is the length of the rod. That's pretty self-explanatory. The medium is basically the power of the rod. So like you see above it, there's one that says ultra light. That is an ultra light power rod. So it's like extremely light. It's going to be extremely sensitive and it can cast very, very small lures. But it's also not going to be strong enough to fight bigger fish. Then right below, you see one that says medium heavy. That one's going to be a bit more powerful in fighting bigger fish, but it's also not going to be as easy to handle or as nice to cast small lures with. And like theoretically, you'd think, oh, a heavy rod is better because they can fight bigger fish, but no, actually, a heavier rod is going to be a lot clunkier, especially if you try to use light weights or fish for small fish. So that's why I'm recommending first of all to get a medium rod because medium is just it's just a happy medium. It's light enough to where you can play small fish and cast small lures, but it's also heavy enough to where if you do hook a pretty big fish, you'll be able to catch it. Hope that clears things up a bit. I have the 6 foot, but I think 6'6" is probably slightly better for casting a bit further if you want. So there we go. And then at the end, we're going to see how much this little starter pack of mine costs. It will probably be less than $200. I'll try to keep it under. Actually, I'll try to keep it under 150. And this is basically 50 of those 150 already gone. But the rod and reel is your most important part. Now we need some line. For line on this reel, get 8-pound test line. It just works for everything. And it's light enough to where you can cast small panfish lures with it, but it's also heavy enough where if you hook a decent sized bass, you're probably gonna be fine. So yeah, I use 8-pound test. Yeah, hi, it's me again. Post editing Warrior 24, realizing once again I used a lot of big words you have no idea what they mean. So 8-pound test line, what that means, it's line that was tested that it's not gonna break with 8 pounds of force. So theoretically, you can lift up to 8 pounds of weight through that line without it breaking. But if you add more than 8 pounds of weight, then the line will break. That matters because the higher breaking strength or a higher pound test, as we call them, is going to mean that you can fight bigger fish and not worry as much about the line snapping. But it's also thicker, harder to handle, and it's also easier for the fish to see. So if you use thicker line, you're gonna get less bite. One more thing to keep in mind about fishing line is that there's 3 different types. There's monofilament, which is just the regular classic nylon line. Then there's braided line, which is like essentially like a very thin rope. That one, 8-pound monofilament will be thicker than an 8-pound braid. But 8-pound braid is basically just more expensive and much harder to deal with tangles. So for beginners, I would recommend monofilament line. The third type is fluorocarbon, which is a single filament. It's not braided or anything, but it's a different material, which is harder to see underwater and is more resistant to abrasion, that means it's less likely to get frayed by scraping into stuff and rocks and such. But the problem is it sinks, so that's not ideal for quite a few fishing techniques where you want your bait to float up off the bottom. For example, trout fishing. Honestly, me personally, I would prefer 6 pound test, but then you might get into trouble if you hook a bigger fish. So 8 pound test is probably the ideal for this. Trilene XL is the classic. You can buy probably any brand, but this one just is just like if you want something that you know is gonna work, get this one. Then this is gonna run us $9. Now we get into the fun part. This is the time when we start getting into lures and stuff, and yeah, this is where most of the money goes in. Because I've seen quite a few beginner bass fishing videos, and what I always see that they say is get a Senko worm, get a spinner bait, and get a crankbait. What I recommend is don't get any of those. Spinner baits, they only work very situationally, and spinner baits are a pain to store. Another thing I'm gonna say is when in doubt, get the smaller lure. Because big fish will go for small lures. Small fish will sometimes go for big lures, but they will tend to avoid them. So, and if you're a beginner, you probably care more about catching a lot of fish than catching a few big fish. So go for smaller lures. I fished big lures and just caught nothing, and I fished small lures and caught big, massive bass on them. So small lures when in doubt. And then here are gonna be my recommendations for specific lures. Number one lure you want is the Acme Castmaster. This I got my first bass on an Acme Castmaster. So more recently, I was fishing on a lake. I was throwing everything. I threw a bunch of baits, even natural baits, and I threw lures. I threw a drop shot, which I'm going to talk about later. None of that worked. But then I dropped the Acme Castmaster, basically first cast with it, in 3 feet from the shore. I pull out this massive sucker fish. There's like a sucker. Suckers don't usually go for lures, but the Castmaster, man. The Castmaster is just insane. Before that, I was fishing at Lake San Antonio in California. There were a ton of bluegill hanging out by a dock. I tried using the a panfish magnet, which I'm also going to talk about later. I tried using some random grubs. I tried using basically everything, and they wouldn't bite that. But the Castmaster, every drop near bluegill, just jig it a bit, and I'll get hit by just some big bluegill. So yeah, this thing will catch you fish. This thing will catch anything. You can catch bluegill, bass, crappie, and apparently suckers. So if there's some type of predatory fish in the area, they will go after the Castmaster. For colors, you want gold. I always go with the gold. The gold one is the one that's always done good for me. I haven't really tried other colors, but the gold one works for me, so hey. You want it on 1/12 ounce size, because this is small enough for bluegill to want it. $3.49, you can get a 1/12 ounce gold Castmaster, and I recommend you get 2 of these, because you might lose one on a snag and want to tie on another one. I learned that the hard way. So get 2 gold Castmaster 1/12 ounce. So next we're gonna talk about the Keitechs. So this is the Keitech Swing Impact. You want the fat Keitech Swing Impact, and then this is gonna catch you bass. One day I was fishing in Clear Lake, California. I was trying all the stuff that I usually try, and I was getting no bites at all. So then I go to the bait shop and I'm like, hey, the guy next to me is pulling out crappie one after the other, and I'm just getting destroyed. What should I try? And then he says, put on a Keitech. So then I buy the Keitechs, I go out back to where I was fishing earlier, and I just start pulling them out. I just start pulling out crappie, pulling out bass, all sorts of fish just start biting the Keitechs. It's actually crazy. The way you use the Keitech, just cast it like near where you think the fish are. Maybe let it sink a bit, and then real slow, probably trying to keep it near the bottom if you can. And just slow and steady, throw in a few twitches, and if there's a bass, they will get this. As per size, I usually see people throwing 5 inches, but the ones I used were 2.8 and 3.8. So let's get one of each. 2.8 inch, you can get crappie on that. 3.8 inches if you're just trying to target bass. Either one of these colors, I'd say. These are the 2 that I've used and that have worked for me. The others probably work, but I haven't used them personally, so I can't speak for them. Now, if you notice, this has no hook, so how are you going to catch fish with this? You need what's called a jig head. For a Keitech, you're looking for something like this. This is good. This could work, but this is probably ideal because it got like the fish shape and then this hook here. So you want the jig head. This looks good. This is not the one I use, but this looks good. You could probably use the 1/8 ounce for both. And it comes with 4 hooks, so that's good. So this is how you rig the swim bait, the Keitech. So this is how it's gonna look like when it's done. As you can see, you have the jig head here, and then this is the Keitech. Rig it again. So for here, punch it through here, then all the way through, and then out the back. And then if you push it all the way in, it should just lie straight like that. That is how you rig up a Keitech. You don't have to get exactly this one. Just get like if it looks kind of like this, then you're good. And then try to make sure you don't get something that's too big or too small. The next best lure I'm going to recommend is you want to use what's called a drop shot rig. It's a bit complicated to tie, but here's the bait that you want to use for the drop shot rig. You want what's called the Robo Worm Alive Shad. Look at it, not in the Bass Pro store, but over here. Let's see. So 3-inch Alive Shad. This is the one you want. Then for color, I've been using this one because I couldn't find the more natural color. So this was the only one that was on stock. So I used this one. But in the past, I've used this one. This one's ideal. This natural looking color. This is just really good. That is the bait that you're gonna want to use for the drop shot. And now to actually build the drop shot rig, you're going to need a sinker and you're going to need a hook. So there's a line of drop shot hooks made by VMC. Yep, these ones. These ones are really good, especially if you're a beginner. So yeah, get size 2. Of course, the size depends on the type of lure that you're using. So like for a 3-inch Alive Shad, the size 2 is probably fine. But if you're using a bigger bait, then you get a bigger hook. And then for drop shot, you're going to need a sinker. So drop shot sinker. Yeah, this is what a drop shot sinker looks like. The ones I use, I just found like a pack of lead weights, of lead drop shot weights that was like that came with a ton. So I just bought that. It was like a value pack. So if you find a value pack of these, then get that. If not, then I'll just put this here, $4.99 for 4 of these. And again, the shape doesn't really matter. Like if you want, you can use the ball, you can use the teardrop. If you can use the slim one. I use the slim one. The slim one is better if you're fishing on grass. The teardrop is better if you're fishing on rocks. And the ball is, I don't know what the ball is better at, but again, it's like you don't need to buy both. But yeah, just pick one of these and buy it. 3/16 is probably the most versatile one, so I'd say get this. And then I can show how to rig up drop shot rig. This is how you rig up a drop shot. So what you do is you cut the line here and you want to hang on to this end here. So first, here is the VMC spin shot hook. This is a size 2. This is either a size 1/0 or 2/0. So we're gonna use the size 2 hook. And then for the VMC spin shot, first you tie the line from the reel, goes here. So then that's tied on, as you can see. Now you tie the line that you cut off, you tie it to the other end, and then on the other end of this line is going to be a sinker. So then you want to have this line be about as long as how far up you want to have your bait off the bottom of the drop shot, which this is usually a good length, so don't overthink it too much. So now you have this, and then you want to attach your sinker. This is a drop shot sinker, like I said. This is the stick one that I always use. And then the cool thing about drop shot sinkers is you don't actually have to tie them. They have this little connector here that you just slide that through and pull on it a bit, and then it just stays. And then if you pull too much, then the line breaks. The idea of this is if the sinker gets caught on some rocks, then you can just pull on it hard, and then the line to the sinker is gonna snap off, but then you're gonna get to keep the bait. If there's a fish on, you get to keep the fish, and then you can just attach another sinker and keep fishing. Just makes it way easier. That is the drop shot rig. Now to add the worm, you just go like this, grab it, and then hook it through the nose like this. And there you go. This is a drop shot rig. This will catch you bass. Then last thing I'm going to recommend for bass, and this is not as much of an effective strat as it is a fun strat, And I'm going to recommend the topwater lure, more specifically a topwater popper. Rebel Pop Art. This is the one I use. What this does is it sits on the surface and then occasionally you give it a twitch and this mouth just makes it go blop. So then you wait a bit and then you go blop again. And then that noise attracts the fish. Especially if it's a time when the fish are active. Don't throw this in like the winter or like at the height of the day in summer when the fish are going to be all chilling near the bottom and trying to get away from the bad weather. But if it's something like a summer evening when the fish are coming out and they're just getting more active, or you see like small bait fish jumping, which probably means they're being chased by bigger fish, that's when you throw this. And then the reason I say it's a lot of fun is that when the fish bites, it just jumps and it just jumps and grabs it, and it looks awesome. I've caught only a few fish on this, but when I did, ooh, it was a lot of fun. And one thing to note with this is when you do get bit, you want to wait before you set the hook. So like when you get bit, don't just you see the splash and pull instantly because the fish might have missed. Usually, what happens is the fish bounces on it, just kind of hits it, but doesn't actually bite it. Then it comes around and bites it. So wait until you feel pressure on the rod before you set the hook. If you're going for panfish, I have a few more recommendations. Panfish that is like bluegill, crappie, heck, maybe you could even consider trout a panfish. But yeah, bluegill, crappie, trout, you want panfish magnets. I will say for bluegill, crappie, and trout, if you're fishing with lures, your first go-to should be the Castmaster. But if you want to like fish a bit of a slower presentation, then you should definitely get the panfish magnet. So this crappie magnet, 85-piece panfish magnet kit, this is what I got. And in Clear Lake, I was destroying bluegill with this. And then in some videos where I've gone with my friends fishing, some videos that are on my main channel, I've just had this under a bobber and just pulling out bluegill. So then you definitely want these jig heads. These jig heads are really good for like small jig heads for panfish lures. I would say the panfish magnet jig heads are the best. Then this kit just comes with like all sorts of colors, and believe it or not, you do need all this because you're gonna lose a lot of these. Like either like a fish is gonna pull them off, or you're just gonna snag them, or they're gonna get broken. Like you're gonna lose a leg because these see how they're like split here. Like a lot of times the fish will just like rip off one of these legs, and you'll need to tie on a new one. So you definitely do need the quantity. You've seen from the purpose of this video, I'm kind of a minimalist, so when I say you need the quantity, you definitely need the quantity. Plus these jig heads are really good, and you can't have enough of these. The way you fish these is there's a lot of ways. My favorite is just put it under a small bobber, wait for a fish to bite. You don't even have to twitch it, like just the thing sitting there, like maybe there's some ripples on the surface that are moving the bobber and giving the magnet a bit of action. Like that will entice fish to bite. Here, this panfish magnet kit comes with these big bobbers. I don't recommend these. Like they're good for crappie, but a bluegill is not gonna be big enough to pull this under. This looks good. See, this is the kind of bobber that you want. Just like really small. What is this? 1 inch by 3/4 of an inch. Yeah, I'm looking at that kind of size right now. Yeah, this is ideal. This is kind of what you want. You doesn't have to be exactly these, but like just something that kind of looks like this is good. Although I will say for bluegill fishing, and I can't stress this enough, if you really, really, really need to catch bluegill, don't bother with lures. Just get a worm, like a live worm. Just put it on a small hook and put that under a bobber, and that will always get bluegill. Like if there's bluegill in the area, they will go for that. Panfish magnets, they won't always go for them. Uh, Even Castmasters, if they're too small, then they won't go for them. But live worm on a size 10 bait holder hook, which I'll talk about, always works. Always, without fail. I think this is it when it comes to lures and such. But terminal tackle means hooks, sinkers. Like I already showed the hooks and sinkers and stuff that you'd use for rigging artificial baits. Now I'm going to talk about what you want if you're using like live bait. Like say you're using corn to try to catch carp. What kind of hooks and stuff are you going to want? Or say you're using a worm for bluegill, like I just said. What kind of hooks do you want for that? For bluegill, if you're fishing a worm, then get a bait holder hook. I don't know, these These are kind of decent. These are good. Just basically get any of these, size 10. So, and the reason it's called the bait holder is it has like two barbs at the back here. What that does is, say you like put a worm in here, that those barbs will kind of keep it in place and help it stay on the hook longer. Size 10. This is what I recommend. Because this is small enough to go in a bluegill's mouth, but I've also caught stuff as big as like 5-pound carps on size 10 bait holder hooks. So definitely recommend this. Say you want to fish something a bit bigger, like say you want to fish like a live minnow for bass or crappie, then this hook is going to be too small for you. So what you want is, this says it's a drop shot hook. Yeah, you could definitely use this for drop shotting and also just for nose hooking minnows. This is going to work. Or if you're fishing for carp, you can put a bunch of corn in here and just throw that. You don't have to get exactly this, like just something that looks kind of like this. I like thin wire as well. Something that just, so yeah, something that just looks kind of like this. Size 2 is probably good. I'm not going to recommend any catfish gear yet because this rod does basically everything, but it's way too light for catfish. For catfish, you're definitely going to want a heavier rod that can throw a heavier weight. If you're fishing for carp and such, and you're holding your rod in your hand, like to where if you feel the bite, you just set the hook, then I recommend you use a straight hook like this. Like, you know how the tip is straight? Like, this is called a J hook, a J type hook. Like, this is a J hook, this is a J hook. Those bait holder hooks are also J hooks. All of these are J hooks, but you might want to like just set your rod down and, I don't know, go for a walk or something, or just go on your phone while you wait for a bite. If you're doing that, where you're not gonna have your rod on your hand, then I strongly recommend you use a circle hook instead. So circle hook. And this only works for fish with bigger mouths, so this isn't gonna work for bluegill, but this works for bass, this works for carp, this probably works for trout as well, although I've never tried it. Then the thing is, circle hooks, they're usually like massive and intended for like catching. Like I use circle hooks for sharks. I use circle hooks for catfish, even though I've never caught a catfish. But when I do fish for them, I use circle hooks. For those, you're gonna want like big 4-0, 5-0 circle hooks. But for stuff like bass and carp, you're gonna want to downsize a bit. So let me see if I can find a smaller circle hook, like a size 2 circle hook, size 4 circle hook. The way you tell a circle hook from a J hook is the circle hook has this, like the tip curved in like this, then this is a J hook. You see how this is straight? That means this is a J hook. 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 This is a circle hook because the tip is curved in. What a circle hook does is you don't have to set the hook. Like with a J hook, when you feel a bite, you have to just pull back hard on your rod to set the hook. With a circle hook, you don't have to do that. The fish will just take your bait, swim away, and then just hook itself. With a circle hook, you don't have to worry about setting the hook. And with a circle hook, you are also probably never going to hook a fish in the gut, which is really good if you're trying to catch and release. Because with a J hook, you might just have the fish swallow the hook and it just gets hooked in the, like in the stomach or something. That is really bad for the fish. Okay, this is good. So this Owner Mutu light circle hook comes in small sizes, which is great. So let's get probably the size 4. The size 4 is probably a good all-arounder. Although it's probably, I would know better if I could just see them on a store, because a size 10 bait holder hook is not necessarily going to be the same size as a size 10 circle hook, and it's also not going to be the same size as a size 10 treble hook. It's complicated with hook sizes. But yeah, something like a size 4, like basically any of these. Like maybe you could just order all of these that's like size 2 through size 10 and just see which one works best. And this is like basically any size 4 circle hook, any size 2 like kind of straight shank hook, and this is like any size 10 bait holder hooks. The brands here are just recommendations. If you're fishing for trout with this thing called power bait, which I'll get to, then you're gonna want a golden treble hook. The reason for this is, for power bait, you want it to kind of float in the water. For that, you want a light hook, and golden hooks are just really light, so then it's gonna float up very easily. This is kind of what you're gonna want to use for trout. Then size, yeah, look how small they are too, because You put power bait. Power bait is basically like a pre-made dough that you buy. I'll get you power bait, but you basically just put this on this hook, and then you catch trout. I would say basically any of these sizes work. And then for the gold treble, you probably want the snelled hook. What this means is that it already comes with like a line leader, and then it doesn't say what line weight it is, but you want this line leader to be 4 pound mono. Because trout have very good eyesight and they're very line shy, so they will see the line. If you fish with anything more than 6 pound test for your leader for trout, you're handicapping yourself. So when you're fishing for trout, don't just straight up tie your 8 pound main line to your hook, because then you're not going to catch any fish. You want to tie on a smaller, thinner line. You could get away with 6 pound test probably, but I would recommend 4 pound. Then that goes to your hook. So this would be 4 pound test ideally, and then you tie this to your main line, which I suggested 8 pound test. And then you put a sinker in between. I'll get to the rigging for trout later. Also, oh yeah, another thing. If you're using the Castmaster for trout, you definitely also want to tie on a leader of lighter weight. Otherwise, the trout are just not going to bite. So power bait, you have a lot of options. It comes in like nuggets. It comes in trout nibbles, trout nuggets. It comes in just like a pal full of dough. Color, I don't know. Everyone's has a different favorite color, but from what I've heard, the rainbow is the ideal. I have not had a lot of success with power bait, but I think that's just because I'm bad. Because people do catch a lot of fish with power bait, but what I've heard is rainbow is the ideal, so that's what I'm gonna recommend. If it's wild trout, like you just go to a stream that has trout naturally, you're probably not gonna catch them on power bait. But for like a lake that stocks trout, power bait is the ideal. Okay, so this is how you make a trout rig. The first thing you do is you take a sinker. We'll get to sinkers later. This is a 1/8 of an ounce steel egg sinker, but we'll get to that later. All you need to know is you just slide this through the line, and then you tie on this thing that's called a barrel swivel. We'll get to those later as well. You can just buy like any small barrel swivel. This is kind of what they look like. The idea is you use it to connect two sets of line. So then you have the main line, and then at the other end you're going to tie another line, and it also helps because it stops the sinker from sliding all the way towards the hook, which you don't want. So you tie this one end here. The egg sinker, as you can see, it can run freely through here, but then over here it just stops. So then we take the trout hook, and now that we have this is actually a very long leader. If I was tying this myself, I would not make it this long, but I guess that's fine. Your little snelled hook is probably gonna come with a loop at the end like this one. So what you do here is you run the loop through the eye of the swivel, and then you run this, then you run the hook through the little eye here, and then you pull. And now this is the power bait rig. You have the sinker, the swivel. The sinker should be able to run through this. This is good. And then over here, this leads to the hook. So yeah, this is the rig. And then to put on the power bait, here I have a packet with a bunch of different colors. I don't recommend you get this because different colors, it doesn't really matter as much. If I did have to recommend a color, like I said, it would be rainbow. But so you just open this. I recommend you get the dough, don't get the eggs or whatever. So definitely recommend this. And what you do is you just grab a bunch and then just push it onto the hook like that. This might be a bit much actually, but the idea is the trout is just gonna eat this, and then it's not even gonna realize there's a hook because it's so small, and it's just gonna swallow it. So definitely don't use power bait if you're fishing catch and release. Only use this if you're planning on keeping the fish. But if you're planning on keeping the fish, then there's nothing wrong with that. Trout are really good eating. I've eaten trout before, they're great. But anyways, yeah, this is the power bait rig. This is called the Carolina rig. And the idea of the Carolina rig is just this sinker, swivel, leader, and hook. You'll see the Carolina rig a lot. You can use this same rig, but replace the hook with something a bit bigger for carp. If you just put like corn in there, or you can just, I don't know, even you can use it for basically any fish that feeds near the bottom. You just use a Carolina rig, then you just change out the side of the line, the side of the hook, and the bait that you use. This is one of the most useful rigs that there are. For the power bait rig, you're also going to need sinkers. So what you want is an egg sinker. And yeah, this works. This works. See, something like this is good. For egg sinkers, something like you could then definitely get something like this. So this also has split shots, and I would say you get the split shots and egg sinkers separately. And for the sinker size, anything from like 1/8 to 1/2 is probably fine, but I would recommend 1/8 to 1/4. 1/2 might be a bit much. Then you can use this not just for power bait, but you can also do a bottom rig for carp with corn using this. So this works. Anytime you want to get like your bait well on the bottom, then you can use a sliding bullet sinker or egg sinker. Like it can be a bullet sinker, egg sinker, doesn't really matter. If you want something more of a low key type of sinker that you want to use to get your bait down, but maybe you don't want it to fall as far, or if you're using a bobber and then you want a slight bit of more weight to your line on like under the bobber to maybe make the hook sink faster below the bobber, then you want what's called a split shot sinker. And then see like this is really good. A kit like this, actually this is a bit expensive, 1849, and they are removable. Like this, something like this is cheaper. Like just any of these wheels full of split shots, you want them to be removable. So, because a regular split shot sinker, the way they work is you crimp them on the line, and then there's no way to remove them. But some have like two prongs sticking out the back that then if you have that on the line, then you just press on that on those two prongs with your pliers, and then it opens the split shot back up. And this kit just comes with a bunch of different options, different sizes for like different situations. Like maybe you just want a little bit of weight, so you put like this smaller one here, or maybe it's like very windy and you need a big boost to your casting, and so you just put one of these bigger ones. That's basically all the sinkers you're gonna need, just egg sinkers and split shot sinkers, and then the drop shot weight. Like with those three, you're just set. And one last thing that I want to get to is I mentioned about trout not biting on thicker line. So if you're throwing a Castmaster for trout, you're gonna want to have a leader of thinner line. And what a leader is you basically just tie line in front of your line. And that line is a different type. So you tie on a thinner line at the end of your 8-pound line, so then the fish are less likely to see it. So for this, I would recommend 4-pound mono. Yeah, let's get the same Trilene XL that I recommended for the main line. But yeah, again, it doesn't have to be exactly this brand. Like just basically any 4-pound test line that you find. Mono or fluorocarbon works as well. Fluorocarbon, the problem it has is that it sinks, and you don't want sinking line if you're using power bait. So I would suggest go with mono. So 4-pound test, just basically any 4-pound test mono that you find works. I'm just suggesting this one because it's just known that it works. I think this is basically everything you need. Okay, so the total for this comes up to $164.05. So, and with this, you can basically fish for think about like what do you want to fish for, like in freshwater. Like if you want to fish for bass, there you can fish for bass with this. If you want to fish for if you want to fish for crappie, then you can just buy some live minnows and just put on this hook under a bobber like this float here, and then just have some fun. If you want to fish for bluegill, then you have quite a few lures that you can use for that. You also have this that you can just put a worm on and have fun. If you want to fish for carp, just put some corn on this hook and rig it with a sinker, with a bullet sinker like this, do the Carolina rig, which I showed, and just you'll catch some carp. Or hey, maybe even skip this. Just like put some corn on a bare hook. Like just take this hook, put some corn, and just tie it straight to the line and cast it out. Or if you want to fish for trout, you got this, and that. And if you don't want to fish for any of those, and you want to very specifically fish for only something else, then I don't know. Then I'm very curious what you actually want to fish for, because those are like the most. Because this will catch like most of the more popular sport fish in the U.S. or at least the most popular freshwater sport fish. Heck, you can even use this in saltwater, like just a Carolina rig with and then buy what's called a Berkeley Gulp sandworm, and then on the beach you can catch surf perch with this. Like this rod, like it all comes down to what rod you have, and this rod is just you can catch basically everything with it as long as it's not too heavy. Anyways, this should get you started with fishing. Thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe, or else you will never catch a fish in your entire life.